Welcome, everyone, to a very special episode of the HR and Payroll 2.0 podcast. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and this week I had the pleasure of speaking with my good friend and an industry executive that I admire greatly, Amberly Dressler. She was the VP of Corporate Marketing at Conga, and formerly the similar role of Head of Marketing and Brand over at isolved, where I got an opportunity to work with her. Although this might be a little bit more for our vendor sort of executive side or vendor leaders, there are messages here for the HR community as well. You know, many of you, and at the end I ask her about this, but many of you are navigating a lot of change, right? A lot of transformation that's going on, either whether incremental or at scale. And how do you position that, right? How do you negotiate that? How do you create diplomacy out of that? How do you market your organization for the future to your organization as well? And so, yeah, I think there's some great nuggets in here for HR leaders and payroll leaders for how to, raise their eminence for their groups. So without further delay, Amberly Dressler. I do a lot of, as you know, a lot of work around brand and marketing and messaging and more go-to-market than I ever thought I'd be doing in my career. But I've learned so much, and I've learned it from leaders like you. And I've always been very impressed with what you accomplished at isolved with your peers. And yeah, I just thought we could talk a little bit about that. But before we do, I want to talk about your new role. You're over at Conga now. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I've been at Conga since mid-December, leading corporate marketing and partner marketing. So everything I did at isolved and trying to catch that lightning in the bottle that we had at isolved over at
Yeah.
Conga.
Yeah. And shout out to, I think Jeff is over there with you, Jeff Webb and
So
Celia.
yeah,
Yeah, so cool. I love how AKKR, the private equity that owns isolved and Conga and safe parts of Safeguard, I guess, kind of leans into that talent community that's in their portfolio, and some of you have kind of shuffled around. I think that's really cool.
yeah. So Lena Tonka is a good example, right, of
Yeah.
that going from an isolved or an AKKR company at isolved to then an AKKR company at Recurly. Conga is actually Toma Bravo, so a new kind of
Oh, okay. I
portfolio
didn't know
for
that.
me. Yeah.
Well, wow, good. No, thank you for correcting me. I didn't know that. I thought that was part of their portfolio, but very cool. Either way, I think it's obviously indicative of what you guys have accomplished together at other brands, obviously. So yeah, shout out to that. But look, I want to talk about this, right? Like, you really went through an evolution at isolve that I thought was, I'm sure you learned a lot, right? I mean, I know I tell my kids are all 20 somethings now, and I tell them like, everywhere I worked, I got a degree in some sort of
Yeah.
thing. Deloitte, it was consulting, and IBM, it was something else. But like thinking back on that, like, was that your first trip down the HR tech lane? And what'd you learn in that time frame?
It was, and folks like you and Stacey Harris, like, gave me a crash course in all things HR tech. Like, I really leaned on you all to get that education. It's interesting, though, from going, like, B2B tech to B2B tech, a lot of the challenges and, like, frameworks are the same of how to
Yep.
grow the business,
Yep.
right? So it's you walk in, you're like, "Oh, I know what needs to be done," right? So there's a little bit of that, but then, HR tech is just so special in terms of, I mean, even the analyst community, right? Like, I've been in others where they aren't as friendly or aren't as much of a community, right? And the community that you all are is just fascinating. But then the customers too, right? Like you do have true people who want to help people. And so marketing to HR benefits payroll leaders is a lot different than marketing to marketers per se or sales. So it just
Yeah.
HR tech is just so special. And I just feel so honored to have spent 5 years in it. And I
Yeah.
hope to again in the future.
Do you think it's one of the hardest things you've ever had to market?
No, I would say no. Marketing to
Okay.
marketers is really, really tough,
Okay.
because they know everything. I would say, like, you look back to when iSolved really started going out to market directly in October 2020, because I know you know, but, folks listening in may not know, before that, they marketed behind their partners, right? And so, there wasn't a lot of, like, direct marketing out in the market. So that's when we started showing up at HR Tech and, working with, folks like you and everything. And the nature of HR, right, in October of 2020, it was HR leaders were looking for a partner who could help them with what was needed to undergo this massive transformation, right, that was happening in their space due to COVID at the time. And then also looking for a community to help. And iSolved was able to give them both. And so it just happened so organically that it didn't feel like marketing, because it was
Yeah.
like, we're all in this together and we need to figure this out. And that community approach just grew and grew in iSolved. So I know it sounds like corny or cliche, but it didn't feel like marketing.
Yeah, yeah. No, I wanna talk about that too because your People Heroes community, I think, is really special. There's a lot of things that I see as a former practitioner in that community that I find externally. Like, for example, I have a lot of leaders, high level payroll leaders, and some that are new. Some, I mean, all ranges, right? Come to me and talk to me. And one of the things that has come apparent to me is just how powerful the community is in taking care of each other. And I think that the exchange and the camaraderie, if you will, in that, and HR is a lot like this too, right? They really do look out for each other. I tell people, don't suffer in silence. Like, there's somebody out who's probably been through this, or they're having the same challenge that you have. Go and engage. And I think the ability for, especially brands that can invest in that. I know it's obviously to get engagement, but it is a tool that the leaders appreciate, and I think that the practitioners need that, right? We need more ways for them to get together and build their own little communities, and help each other because we're all in this together, so to speak. But I want to come back to your to the front there. We were talking about it because I think it was Tim Sackett that said one time, and I think it's spot on that they're not buying, you're selling, right? It's like, and I think that there is a lot of that in HR tech, right? You have to really sell these solutions, and people in a lot of cases are betting their careers on this investment, or maybe they're betting the future of their company on, not necessarily entirely, but they're people, right? And I mean, it is a very emotional and big decision. But like, what did you learn about that? About what HR tech actually means in terms of as a product to the customer?
Yeah. So for when I was at isolved, one of the things that we did within the community, but then also the road shows, right? Like, because it was paired with that digital community presence, but then also the on-site community presence. Because I mean,
Yeah,
one year we did 50 road shows, right? And
yeah,
we weren't going to Manhattan; we were going to Dubuque, Iowa, right? Because we
yeah,
were going where our customers were, and what we found was that audience, they weren't looking for like total transformation. They weren't looking for big transformation projects. So like, what's the one thing I can do now that's going to make the
right.
biggest impact in our organization? And a lot of times, what they needed more help with was, yeah, the software is great. It's amazing. Pragya Gupta and her organization have built an incredible product, but it was more about what can I do next, and then how do I roll it out into my workforce because
Yeah.
they needed help with that next level of okay, I know I need to do this, but then now how do I go sell it within my own organization? So a lot of times when we were talking to the champion of like the people hero, the HR benefits payroll leader, they're like, yes, I know I need this. I know I need this. Now help me. How do I make my case? And then how do I manage the change that's needed within my organization? And that was true of like the very smallest of companies to the biggest
Oh,
ones
yeah.
that we served.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I mean, payroll's not, and HR too, right? We're not getting this wad of cash to like go buy the
Yeah.
next. I like to say it's like the iPhone, right? We're not lining up for iPhone payroll
Yeah.
17,
Yeah.
and getting in line. The CEO is not knocking on your door saying, "Go get it."
Yeah.
So you do have to sometimes do more with less, and you have to find low hanging fruit and self funding projects because you're not going to get more funding. But no, I love it, and I think that you guys had such a you nailed it, like such a holistic approach to that community. It was more than just a website or something, right? It was a real brand. It was a real place where people could get help and exchange. But I mean, I think it's really important that you came at it from such a like genuine place, but also just a holistic place, and hit it from a direction that people wanted to be a part of it. I feel like. Did you get
Yeah.
that sense that it was almost like a fan thing?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, we knew we had something really special when customers started showing up to the events or walking up to the booth and like showing us that they were wearing pink, right? And that
Yeah,
just made our hearts so happy. But then when they started showing up in their capes to the road shows and everything, like this is their brand, right?
it is.
It's
Yeah,
no longer
yeah.
ours. And I mean, as a marketer, like I couldn't have asked for a more dreamlike state. But the way People Heroes came about was actually we weren't telling our customer stories. I think when a lot of us arrived, so myself, James Norwood, we had zero actual named customer stories. We
Oh,
had
wow.
two anonymous ones. And we're like, we need to go out there and tell our customer stories more. And so People Hero was born from more of an advocacy play. So I remember, I think it was like September 2021, and somehow we were able to manage a customer conference during that time. Because again, during the pandemic, we did it in Florida, and there was like this small break of when you could have an event at that time, And we were signing people up with an iPad of, do you want to share your story? And the promise was that eventually there would be a community where they could, not only share their story, but also source advice and socialize with their peers and everything. And so we're signing people up. I remember our first mascot costume didn't arrive in time, so we like hired somebody to like wear this latex get up. It was quite the show.
Yeah,
And then with
I love it.
the mascot ended up arriving. So it was born out of the advocacy. And then we're like, we need to be able to describe all of these different people who are responsible for employee experience in a way that makes sense to all of them. It celebrates them. And so like, it's people heroes, right? And then the community came, and then the road shows came, and then people heroes, which wasn't actually intended to be part of our main brand story, became the story, right? And then the customer stories came as well. And you mentioned Jeff Webb. I'm fortunate to work with him at Conga now. He's like the best customer storyteller, right? And
Yeah.
so he was able to just really speak with these customers and have it so like not only did all of our employees know their stories, but like the analysts knew their stories. Like think Jaylene in Sitka, Alaska, right? Like most of us can tell her story.
Oh,
And
yeah, I had lunch with her once.
yeah, yeah. And so so the customer stories, and it just everyone says they're customer first or customer centric, but like
Yeah,
it really is still to this day and will continue to be because of like just some happy accidents, as I think Bob Ross says,
yeah,
having
yeah.
mistakes.
You guys really did catch lightning in a bottle. I mean, to get your customers to become, you remember the book Raving Fans, I think it was in the 90s or 2000s they had. You guys really did have that, and you're right. They're showing up in capes and they're celebrating your brand for you. That's gold. You can't every brand wants that. What do you think, or where did the light bulb go off where you felt like, hey, this is more than a user group. This is a real community. Because there's a difference, right? If it's one thing, like I said, to just stick a portal out there and a logo and say, hey, here's a community. But if there's no real engagement, is it a community? But like, what do you feel like made it that?
Yeah, I think there were just so many signs of how lonely our
Yeah.
customers were, because
Yeah. They
I
wanted some
saw.
love.
Exactly. And isolved since has gone up market quite a bit, but like a lot of them were very small customers, the teams of one, right? And it's like they didn't have anybody to support them. It was a situation where even asking them to come spend 4 hours with us at a
Yeah.
roadshow was a lot for them, right? And so there were just all these signs, and maybe even the line that was like created at that first connect, where people are like, I want to sign up for this. I want to be able to share my story. And so it's just all of these like proof points of them reaching out to us about
Yeah.
wanting to connect with like a peer or a mentor or something. So it just there was all these signals of how lonely the profession was at that time, and maybe still.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think, I mean, I have a lot of conversations privately with people with, frustrations of the way payroll is kind of not respected in their organization, and they don't feel like they're getting traction, and it's burning people out, right? And I think they need a place to go and express that and learn how to, leverage the emotional skills they have to navigate that, because there is a diplomacy to all of it. But yeah, no, I love it. I think you guys really nailed that. And you mentioned events. This is something that comes up a lot with, like, especially startups that I work with. When should we show up at an event? When should we do this? When should we do that? And I have an opinion on that. And I've seen some very unique ways in which organizations have made their dollar go a long way and get a lot of impact out of that. But like, what's your thoughts on just the whole, because you guys really nailed that micro event, the roadshow you talked about. And I see some of the bigger companies starting to do that, right? Shifting to more regional, maybe smaller events instead of these one mega customer event. It's a little overwhelming. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, in terms of, when do you jump in the game, and like, what's your thoughts on the difference between the big and the small micro event versus the mega event?
Yeah, I think it's really dependent on the audience. So at iSolve, we had made the decision instead of one mega customer event, right, to go into more regional, and then have the road shows too. But then at Conga, we serve a much larger customer, right? Like more than half of the Fortune 100 work with Conga, and so
Oh, wow.
there is an expectation of bigger companies to have kind of the bigger events. So I'm not allowed to share this on social media, but like our keynote sponsor is a Hall of Fame quarterback who who played for the Colts for a very long time and
Oh,
has
wow.
a really
Who could it
talented
be?
brother. Yeah, by the time this goes, I think we'll be good. But
Awesome.
and so there is an expectation, of the bigger like Dreamforce and those type of things. So I think it's just always dependent on the audience, but for startups, like you may not need a 40 by 40 booth at HR Tech, right? But there's things that you can test a little bit more. So even for us at isolved in years past, we would kind of dip our toe in the water of an event. Like, is there some sort of like watering hole or happy hour that you can sponsor instead of having the booth? But one thing I'm not a fan of though is having a speaking opportunity at a show and then not having somewhere that they can follow up for,
Right.
right? Because there's booth traffic that comes from that, right? And so you always have to think if we are doing this sponsorship offer, we did somehow get a speaking spot, like what's the follow up? Because people will want to go talk to you after.
And one of the things I heard somebody say recently was like, how do you make your event investment like a listening channel? I think is what they called it, and not a sort of a swag tour, right? Or like, how do you get
Yeah.
quality leads? Because there is, some sort of there is a bit of waste in some of that. People may, don't really care what your product does or doesn't do, but there are a lot of really healthy leads too that are there. And there's a lot of benefit, I think, to being at events just from a brand equity and a brand awareness perspective, right? Like the smaller, say, payroll events, right? They don't have a lot of turnout, but they're very volunteer led, done by the local chapter, practitioners, right? And for them, that might be the only event that they can go to. And it's very important for their learning and the camaraderie and the community. And I think when vendors show up in that, not expecting massive lead buckets, but
Yeah.
just are making an equity investment in the community, I think there's a lot to that. But what are your thoughts on that part of it?
Yeah, I love the education element, and that has been very successful in terms of like, how can we get them their SHRM credits that they need? How can we get
Yeah,
them, their continuing education? How can we get them certified in our product, right? Like anything to build their resume, because I mean, the ultimate goal is, people leave organizations. Are they going to bring us with them, right? And
yeah,
so, kind of going through a similar exercise in my new role of how do we get folks what they need for their career and then continue to advance with them? So in my new role, there aren't as clear cut like continuing education credits that they need, but could we partner with, a university like Harvard for continuing business and get them a certification that way? And so it's the value add. But then I think what a lot of like newer vendors, the mistake they made is thinking that they're going to go to a show and then that's going to turn into bookings in a week, right? It's a
yeah.
relationship play. And, a lot of people don't want to hear this, but you got to play the long game and build relationships and trust. So,
Yeah, especially with HR and payroll, right? Like there's so
yeah.
much of if they don't, they got to guard. They have to guard the organization from risk. So then
Yeah.
there's this like, well, if I don't know it, I'm not gonna bother with it. And I think if you're not there, you're not there in a lot of ways in the conversation too. So, but look, Emberly, I want to talk to you about like the brand journey that you guys went on, because when you got to iSolve, I don't think it definitely wasn't the brand that you left, right? I mean, and you guys really did a great job of totally redoing it and making it like all those things that we talked about. But like, what was that like? What'd you learn along the way? And I think you're going through it again, branding. You're doing some branding work, right?
I can't even tell you how much I've learned, like,
Yeah, got another
and
degree, right?
yeah, and some of it I'm like, I have to kind of check myself a little bit. I'm like, am I going in my own bias because of the success we had? Because maybe it won't work in this way or whatever. But our good friend Opal, who only needs a first name in this
Yes.
industry, and you know what? It's like you learn from the company, but then you just learn from everyone around you, right? Like I said, the storytelling with Jeff, like with Opal, she always says this phrase like, we can't market the way that we're just structured internally. Like if somebody needs an org chart to understand how to work with you externally, like it's not going to work. And so one thing that like worked for iSolved and then that I'm trying to do now is a lot of times they're like, well, the people that I serve in HR is different than the person that I serve in benefits, different than the person I
Right.
serve in payroll. And so it's like, we're not talking the individuals at a brand level. We have to talk about holistically that they're the people heroes, right? And that was successful for iSolved. And then with Conga, we serve finance leaders, procurement leaders, sales leaders, the CEO, like all of these different lines. And it's like, what's that top level vision that people can buy into? And so that's a exercise that we're actually going through now. But I started in mid-December, and by mid-March, we'll have gone through a full rebrand,
Wow.
a close of an acquisition, fast integration of that acquisition, and our customer and partner event. So when we're on site at it's called Connect, Congress Connect, as iSolve's Connect is, will reveal the brand live, right? So people are walking into the
Wow.
current red and blue. And then our CEO, Dave Osborne, he's going to reveal the brand. People walk out, and if that magic, it's not magic. The team's working really hard on it
I love it.
into the new brand. But it's that same thing of, maybe someone who's only responsible for this area in the business goes, but I don't see that persona at that top level. And it's like,
Hmm.
that's kind of not the point, right? Like we can't talk about each and every person, each and every product without that like top line narrative. And that's what we did so well at iSolve with my peers is that top level. What are we believing in? We're believing in that we're going to be the company that's going to help these people heroes grow, right? And that's what
Right.
we're going through right now of Conga of what's the vision. And so right now, Conga talks a lot about maximizing revenue and reducing risk, which are ultimate goals, right? But when somebody walks up to our booth, right, they tend to ask like, "Oh, what do you do?" And then we list off all of the products we have and the people we serve, right? And that's not a great story, right? Because the people glaze over it, and then people will ask, "Okay, well, is Conga like the Conga drum? Is it like the Conga line?" And we've been saying no, like at no
Yeah.
association, right? Which isn't a great way to start off a conversation with someone walking up to your booth of no, stop, like
Yeah.
do not pass go, do not collect $200.
Not a great
So
experience. Yeah.
exactly. So we're like, okay, how do we talk about quoting and pricing and contracts and doc auto and everything else in a way that makes sense at the top line that also makes sense to sales leaders, finance leaders, procurement leaders, legal leaders, and so on. And so where we're going with this is like everything that quoting and pricing and contracts and document automation and I think I already said pricing. Ultimately, it ladders up to like commerce, right? Like, how do you buy and sell goods while protecting the business? And so, and then when you think about Conga, we're like, what we want to stand for is that joining this commerce engine is easy. There's shared direction. And then when you think about the Conga line, what does it do,
Yeah.
right? It gets people out of their chairs
Yep.
and moving in the same direction. So, where we're going with this is that Conga is where commerce lines up, right? So we're like, how
Yeah.
do we line up that entire commerce engine? And so it doesn't matter if you're in legal, it doesn't matter if you're in sales, like everybody is in that shared direction. And then
Yeah.
so when
I
people
love it.
say things like, oh, like the Conga line, we say, exactly. That's what it's like to work with us. There's shared direction, there's easy handoffs, like
Yeah.
it's inclusive. So
I love it. I love it. It's very actionable and very, I don't want to say emotional, but maybe to some extent, there's an emotion to getting up and moving. I mean, how do you know, like, when it's time to rebrand? You talked a little bit about that, but like, what do you think is like when it's time?
yeah, for me, there has to be something significant
Mhm.
changing in the business. So, leaders are guilty, it'll come no surprise, of wanting to put their stamp on the organization, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes rebrands happen because there's a new leader in that seat and they want it to be theirs, right? And that to me, like, you shouldn't rebrand for vanity's sake, right? But when your organization is undergoing significant change that you need to like really say, this is the new direction, that's when it's time. So for I saw way back in 2020, it was we're going to start talking to customers and prospects directly in the market. We're going to have more brand investment versus just marketing behind our partners. We're going with a platform approach. We were bringing Infinisource at the time together with iSolved. And so there was an acquisition play of it. And it was like a signal to the market that we were doing something different. And I mean, it was the best decision. And James Norwood was there, of course, at the time, and he's just brilliant at this stuff. And some of his lessons, we were talking about what you learn from a company, but what you learn from people. Like
Yeah.
I hear James in my head every single day. Like we don't call people users, right? And so like I'm constantly editing things like don't call our customers users, right? Because
Yeah.
he's always
I
like
like that.
only software companies and pharmaceutical companies call people users, right? And so
Yeah.
there's
What
like
do you call them?
those things. Well, they're either sellers or they're people heroes or they're,
Okay.
things like that.
I
So,
like it. I like it.
yeah. So then for Conga, it was, we did just acquired Pro's B2B business. And so we need to put our kind of flag in the sand there. There is new leadership, but there is a lot of new direction, right? Rather than saying kind of all or nothing with the platform approach, it's kind of that you can take what we have as you grow. So more best of breed. There's significant attention from owners and leaders for this next phase of growth. The company had also acquired other companies
Mhm.
in the past, and it's the consolidation of the companies and like the go forward plan. So so much is changing at Conga for the right reasons that it's like, it's the same with iSolved. There was never a better opportunity to be
Yeah.
like, this is the new direction.
It was time. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think brands do age, like, in some ways where it's time to, like, refresh it for the times, if you will, or for the future. So, yeah, no, it makes total sense. But when you think back on that, what's something that you learned that you would say, like, "I didn't see that coming," and you've got it now in the toolbox where, or something, some opportunity maybe you saw in what you guys did at iSolve that you're bringing to the new brand?
Yeah, I would say, maybe it doesn't answer the question directly, but one thing, the pink, right? With
Mhm.
iSolved, like
Oh, yeah.
iSolved's known
Yeah,
for
you
the
guys
pink,
did the colors. Yeah.
and just seeing everybody wear the pink and everything has been just so rewarding. But there's something I learned that I always like stick in my back of my head that it's like by the time you're sick of wearing your brand colors, or by the time like maybe you're sick of messaging and you think it's
Yeah.
time to change it up, is when it's finally like resonated, right? So it's
Yeah.
like again back to the long game of like you're the only one paying as much attention to this as than anyone else, and so that's something I learned, like, and I'll never get sick of pink and I'll never get sick of the Conga purple now, which by the way is pros that we acquired. They were red or blue rather, and then Conga was red. So the company is coming together. It's
Okay.
purple. So
I love it.
Delta, I know you know and love. They did something similar.
That's
Uh,
right. Yep.
yeah. So it's you just gotta repeat it, and it's gotta be memorable, and you just gotta not venture from that. I guess the one thing I've learned to answer it more specifically is the partner element of it. So
Mhm.
a lot of it was, oh, are we the people heroes because we're the partners, right? And so the education and enablement of the partners of no, we're all serving that end benefits HR
Yeah.
payroll person. And so that's something I'm trying not to make the same mistake of how do we enable the partners to then go sell that story too.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, the whole ecosystem has to be educated and prepared as well. Yeah, I think it's interesting. We're entering into a really interesting time now with brands, right? And it's like, how do you stand out when everyone has AI, everyone is, doing all the same things? Like, what are your thoughts on that? How do you see AI helping you now, as you sort of, because obviously the last 5 years, you didn't have all that entirely at your disposal. Now you have it. Like, what are your thoughts on using it for the future?
Yeah, it's interesting because the last like kind of redesign of a website we went through, we're like, this is the last time where, maybe half or more of the work is not done by AI, right? And so
Right?
it's how do you as a professional get ahead of that and be like, how can I be the authoritative figure on this, right? And the other thing, it's interesting because we were talking about how lonely the profession was like back during the pandemic, and so that's where the community really stuck and everything. But now it's like everybody's like, "Oh crap, how do I how do I
Yeah.
catch up and be the authoritative figure on AI?" And so it's still that community element, though, right? You ask your peers, you ask your partners, and everything. So it's all about the people,
It is.
right?
It
That you
is.
surround yourself with.
No, I love it. I want to talk to you too about something that I've been really obsessed with lately. Is Reddit. I've really gotten, and I've even done a couple of analysis for a client or a few clients to kind of understand the perception that's happening in there. There's so much. I don't know if people understand this. How much sentiment, information, customer experience is being just dumped into that thing at will. There are so many trends and answers in there about what they think about not just your brand and your product, but like the industry and the problems they're dealing with. And it's fascinating to me. It's fascinating to me. And you can find some really material. And I know Reddit has a whole business line around this, right? They're not crazy, but what are your thoughts on that? Like, how do you control the narrative now when you don't control the narrative, especially when AI is pulling from things that, for example, like, one of the things we found in analyzing some of that Reddit data is there's old information that is out in the ether that is
Yeah.
getting pulled into, that is building a perception for one element of one of my clients' parts of their business and their go to market. And that's something they've got to clean up. But like, now that you've got, we're not going to Google and searching anymore. We're asking for answers from ChatGPT and answer engines. Like, we've learned your press releases are huge, your research, your blogs, your articles, all of that. But like, how do you make sure that the right message is happening in these places that you can't be in control of it all the time?
Oh, Reddit is the $1,000,000 question
It's
right
amazing, isn't
now.
it?
I had yeah, if you told me, as much time I'd spend on, like, trying to figure out, Reddit from the vendor perspective, like, I
Yeah.
would have
So I'm not
called
over
you crazy.
fascinated, right? Am I not
No.
crazy? Yeah.
No,
It's
so the
fascinating.
LLMs are obviously using Reddit as, like, a main source, which is
Yeah.
challenging, right? Because it could be not the most accurate information from the people who are using it, right? And so, you can't be reactive to Reddit anymore. So in the past, it was, oh, maybe this thread, a customer's upset, and someone would come in and try to like, hey, we've contacted you, or can you contact us, or we want to help with the issue here, and that still has to happen to some degree, right? Like the customer listening of, has anyone actually helped this person? Have they reached out? And those
Yeah.
type of things. But then you have to be proactive too of having like stakeholders within the organization proactively posting, proactively doing
Yeah.
ask me anythings, those type of natures. But the minute a vendor goes in and is not authentic is the minute you'll get roasted in Reddit, right?
Yep.
And so
Yep.
it's this balancing act. And what we're finding is what you should do anyway, right? Is the transparency of
Mhm.
I work for this company and I'm answering on behalf of this company, right? Because if you're just going in and being like, that hasn't been my experience with this, like they're gonna sniff you out, right? And that's just not good practice anyway. But I do wonder, when SEO originally came out, there was lots of signals, right, in terms of what who was more visible versus others, and like that continues to be a black box, but people are pretty trained on what like
Yeah.
signals are stronger than the other. And the LLMs are going to continue to evolve that too, right? I'm not the expert here, but I'm like, how do Google and ChatGPT or OpenAI work together or cut each other out? Because Google has made it where a lot of times you don't have to go to the website in
Mhm.
order to get your answer, right? And then if it's also getting pulled from the LLM, they're going to lose ad dollars because people aren't going to the websites too, right? And so for marketers, our website traffic is going to go down, right? Because you
Yeah.
have Google surfacing answers, and then you have LLM surfacing answers, and maybe they never go to the website.
Right.
And so we have to just figure out how to like have that unstructured content out there that they
Yeah.
can pull and make sure it's accurate.
Agreed, agreed. Yeah, it's fascinating to me, and I've been advising my vendors, to really lean into Reddit and say, "Look, own the narrative that's out there."
Yeah,
But you don't wanna be that, you don't wanna be that angry Yelp, angry restaurant owner on Yelp complaining
yeah,
that someone didn't like your, whatever. I'm like, you've gotta be more just like my style of marketing is always inform, educate, engage. Don't go in there trying to sell. Don't go in there trying to correct. Go in there trying to show people how to get the most out of your product and be available and be accommodating and live your brand in Reddit, right? But you got to control that, I think. And you've got to really be thinking about your AEO and GEO strategies now to make sure that what's being surfaced back to people, because they are going to ChatGPT and Perplexity and others to ask these questions about isolved or whatever, fill in blank, any Conga, any platform. And I think I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. I believe, everybody got really, really stirred up a couple of months ago when they said, I think it was either Claude or OpenAI were going to start doing ads, right, in there, right? And I said, look, why are we worried about this? I mean, yeah, I think there is some nefariousness that could happen, you know what I mean? But everything has ads, right? Google didn't start with ads. YouTube didn't start with ads. But here's the thing about YouTube. It's an answer engine that we've been living with for 20 years now, 2 decades, right? Companies that have been really showing up well on YouTube, I think, are going to do a good job and have the skill sets and the frameworks to actually work well with things like ChatGPT and other answer engines, right? Because if we, like I do this all the time. If I want to do something, I look it up in YouTube, even if I know how to do it. I just go and look what other people are doing to figure it out for myself. Everybody's doing that, right? Everyone's looking for, so I think the HR tech world and all of tech could lean into that how to use case that happens on YouTube for things in our personal lives and be really well aligned with what's going on with ChatGPT and others.
yeah. I don't hate
Yeah.
ads as as a marketer. I think that if that's where your customers or prospects are living, you need to be there, right?
Yeah.
The challenge that I've had with like social ads in particular over the years is say you go on X, right? And
Mhm.
it's where your ads end up, right? Because X is
Yes.
just such a complex and just deep, deep ecosystem that it's you really don't have control of how your brand shows up on what threads, right? The thread could be just awful, and then it's
Right, right.
your ad surface there, right? And so
Yeah,
that's where I would be curious as to the context in which your ads are going to be delivered on ChatGPT, because people, as you know, like are using it as their therapist, right? And like
right.
there's
Yeah,
both personal and professional uses for it. So how the ad shows up is something that we're going to have to like ask
agreed.
ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's like everything. It's a quality over quantity thing. Like we do a lot of work with this podcast now to really try and engage. We're boosting our trailers and eventually we might do some some ads that position us in different places to get to the edge. But what I'm finding is that we've always been rooted in this idea that we don't want 10,000 people subscribing. We want 1,000 listeners subscribing. Even if that's
Right.
less, it's about getting people who actually are materially using it. And I think that's the hard part, even for any brand, trying to get to the right people and make sure it's being used to value. So look, Amberly, I could go on and on. I love talking to you. I learned so much, and this is so informative. I want to ask you this one thing, maybe two things. So one, I want to talk about. I think a lot of what people have to do today as HR leaders is market and be brand and have a brand, right,
Yeah.
in the organization, not just personally, but as an operation and as a team. Like, what are your thoughts on like what advice would you give to the people heroes out there who are maybe needing to use a little bit of the word came up this week in a conversation I had with a leader, diplomacy, right? And I would say it's a little bit of marketing too, but diplomacy is a good word, right? Trying to convince people that maybe don't understand what HR and payroll really are doing, what they need and how they can help. And because one of the battles, as you know, is getting that upward voice as an HR and payroll leader. But what would be your maybe marketing or branding advice for them to position their operations better to get that investment, to get the eyes on their data, to get the conversations that they need and sell themselves a bit.
Yeah, know your audience, right? So if you're talking to the finance leader, you got to speak his or her language, right? I think that's just true of everything, you do, everything that HR needs to do, everything that marketers do is know your audience and make sure you adapt to what they care about, right? So if I'm an HR leader and I'm walking in and I'm trying to pitch something that just is not something that finance cares about, you're going to lose your audience, right? One thing I really learned about like being in high growth, kind of high change organizations is something that Lena Tonk always said, who's at isolved, is like go walk the halls, right? Like, so before you
Yeah.
go do a big presentation or a big pitch, it's like, who have you already gone to talk to about that? So like, what were their objections? Where did they add value? And then like continue to tweak what you're presenting and pitching, right? So you have all of your audiences aligned before you ever go to your business owner or your CEO. And that to me is just something that people learn as they grow in their career versus like early on, right? Because you walk in like, I know this is going to land and da da da, but like if you haven't gotten alignment around you before you go pitch to the main person, you're just going to fall flat, right?
Yeah, no, agreed. I think that's great advice. And I think a lot of these leaders today, I think the skill sets that they're going to need tomorrow is going to be a lot of marketing and positioning and change leading and convincing people that we need to go in a different direction than maybe where we're headed in some, many cases. So look, Amberly, this has been fantastic. Any closing words for those new marketers or just marketers out there struggling with B2B or SaaS tech? Any advice for their marketing and brand wins this year?
Yeah, I would just say, don't become like the inside voice. Let me describe that a little bit more in that don't market with all of the products you have. Don't market with all the people you serve. Don't market to Opal's point that I mentioned earlier based on how you're structured, right? Like, oh, well, maybe benefits is over here, but payroll's over here. So we have to make sure that, we're talking about them separate. It's like, what's your top line narrative that can
Yeah.
be the vision that people buy into? And they may start over here and then grow into it with you. But it just, I see it over and over again that we like lead with product, we lead with features and functions. We lead with how we're structured internally. And you just got to think about, what's the vision that they can buy into? Because I know obviously the technology is really, really important. It's how they ultimately operate every day. But a lot of times the reasons customers buy from you instead of a competitor isn't the tech, right? It's more, are you going to be a partner in this? Do I believe what you're saying now? And then do you have a vision for the future too?
Yeah, agreed. It sounds like what you're saying, I feel like over the course of this is you need a single truth to anchor around for your brand. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. I love it. This has been so good, Amberly. We need to do this more often. And next time I'm in San Diego, I promise we're gonna we're gonna get together. But where would you like folks to maybe reach out to you? I know you're on LinkedIn. I'll share that. But anywhere else you any other links?
Yeah, please add me on LinkedIn. I wouldn't be a marketer if I didn't plug conga.com. It's going to be new and nice and purple by the time this airs, and it shows how Conga's for commerce lines up.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. We'll share those links. And yeah, always good to see you, Amberly. I really appreciate you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thanks, Pete.